So Young Arts Fundraisers, just as a way of introduction to myself and Zoe, is a professional network for young people or early career fundraisers who work in the arts or would like to work in the arts. And we have, our main objective is to make the cultural sector stronger by creating a stronger sector of fundraisers and to make it more sustainable over a long period of time. That being said, we do that by a series of upskilling events, of panel discussions, networking events to bring people together. And also we run a year-long mentoring program in association with the Institute of Fundraising as well. So that's a little bit about us. And we're going to talk to you today. Hopefully there'll be a presentation. Oh, wow. As I say it, it happens. About where the money comes from and why everybody in the arts is a secret fundraiser. Handing over to Zoe now.
Thanks, Juliet. So we are going to cover fairly quickly these 4 areas, and then we'll leave a lot of time for conversation and for any questions and potentially some demos. So if we're moving swiftly on to the basics, and it might sound a bit strange to say what is fundraising, but we just really want to clarify that it isn't being a fundraiser in an organization per se. Anything that you do to facilitate money coming in is pretty much fundraising. And we'll go through this a little bit later. Firstly, there are quite a few different types of fundraising. There are some of the more traditional ones like trusts and statutory fundraising. Those are your lottery money, your Arts Council funding, government funding, big foundations like the Wellcome Trust, those kinds of things. You have corporate fundraising, which is sponsorship from companies, that general thing. You have major donors. Those are the people with lots of money who like the arts and want to give back. And you also have quite an overlooked section, which is individual fundraising, which are those people donating on the door to an event or gift aiding their ticket, the cost of their ticket to an event, those kinds of things. There are some very common misconceptions around fundraising and what Julia and I do for a living, which the main one being that there are 2 ends of this spectrum for fundraising. You either simply send a letter off and a check arrives in the post, or you schmooze somebody at a dinner party and they hand over wads of cash to you, or it's the other end of the spectrum and that, you know, you sell your artistic integrity and your soul to an oil company. They are very, very rarely either end of this spectrum. Generally speaking, they land somewhere in the middle. And we'll talk about this a little bit later, and please feel free to ask us any questions at the end. But that's one of the major misconceptions. Julia will touch upon some of the other ones a little bit later on around things like the misconception that you need a venue because you might need to host galas, or you might need to have an actual place to do stuff to get that money in for. Completely misconception. And also being very conscious that we're talking to you in the Midlands, that all the money's in London. It really isn't, and people are increasingly looking outside to see how they can support across the UK. So skills. What skills do you need to be successful in fundraising? We titled this presentation that you were all secret fundraisers, and we really mean it, because whatever you do needs to be funded, needs to be paid for somehow, and whatever you do within that, you will play a role in fundraising. So if you're curating something, you might be able to take major donors on a tour. You might be able to take your donors around and tell them all about how you curated this amazing thing. Are you producing an artwork or a piece? That piece of art is what gets people excited and wanting to support you financially. Are you producing something? Are you a producer? You're managing the budget, you're managing the whole project, and that's what people need to know about in order to give you that money. So all of these skills that you are absolutely using day to day are completely applicable across all those income streams that I first mentioned. And yeah, we're pretty willing to bet that you use them every day, whether or not you recognize it. So to briefly go into these 4 that we've written down, firstly, resourcefulness. You know, you probably draw on your experience, on your creativity, on your ability to problem solve every day in what you do. And that's exactly what you need to do when thinking about fundraising and how you can get that money to do your project. Passion, we're going to touch on this later, but people give to people. And passion is what funders or major donors or companies look for when they are looking to sponsor, financially help art and culture. Drive. So you will get setbacks in fundraising, as you get setbacks in kind of every area of life. You know, not everybody says yes to you every time, but I'm pretty sure that you will all have picked yourselves up again and kept on going, kept driving forward. And that's exactly what you need to do in fundraising, in chasing down that money. And finally, knowledge. You need to know everything about what it is you're doing, whether that is the kind of logistical things like budget, how much does it cost, timeframes, how long is it going to take, impact, what change are you going to make through what you're doing. And finally, it's really, really important to know your own value. I think another misconception that Julia will touch upon is the misconception that the artist, that you are getting more out of a fundraising relationship than the funder is, and it's really not true. You have so much to give, and understanding that will help you move forward. So, tips and tricks. I'll hand over to Julia.
Right, tips and tricks. Where do I find funding? That's a really easy answer. Absolutely everywhere. And how do I find it? So I think these two questions can be taken into account together. Fundraising can be a hugely creative job, especially when you work in smaller organizations. In the larger the organization, the more specific your job can be. Like you heard Zoe and I say, I've worked in corporate, Zoe works in trusts and foundations, but normally most organizations do not have development departments that big. You know, some people don't even have specific people who work in development. You'll have an operations manager who seems to be a curator and a fundraiser and, you know, a jack of all trades. So it's really amazing that people who might not realize they're fundraisers are actually doing a full-time job at the same time. But basically, the real easy answer to those two questions is you can be creative. And you don't need a venue, like Zoe said. You don't need any of these things that people think you need in order to host a gala or, you know, an event, a networking event, meetings. You don't need any of that. So I looked at some of the examples that I've really enjoyed seeing over my past years in fundraising, to kind of give you an example of some of the creativity people have come up with. So, I mean, one over lockdown, everybody's had to be so creative. Caldwell Children, not an arts organisation, but hosted an amazing pub quiz weekly during lockdown. It then gained so much kind of publicity that they got celebrities to come onto it. I mean, they weren't very large celebrities. I think one of them was Peter Andre, but I got quite excited. But then there's also so many more kind of creative things you can do. So I worked with an artist, Matt Collishaw. He partnered with different designers and their shops, and he would decorate the insides, maybe provide some artwork to go into the shops, and also decorate any of their events that they had as well with his artwork. This was much more beneficial to the shop as it was to the artist. I mean, it was beneficial for both, but basically what it did is it created a huge amount of marketing and press around the store, and people were coming into the store just to see the artwork. But it was amazing press for Matt as well, because all of these people who would not normally understand or know who he is got to see all of his work as well. So something like that is really fantastic. All he needed to do was, you know, basically turn up himself and utilize his artistic ability to come and curate a kind of mini exhibition within a shop. And local boutiques love this, local malls, local shops, because it, one, looks fabulous for them that they're doing this with different organizations, but also it gives them twice the amount of marketing almost for free, because what you're paying for is to get the artist into the shop, but then you're getting all of the marketing from the organisation as well. One of my absolute favourite ones, and I really enjoyed kind of digging this one up, was personalised poetry readings and recordings. An organisation called Poet in the City did these. It was at an in-person event, and they got their patron, who's a lovely stage actress called Juliet Stevenson, to come, and they did it in a hotel. So they kind of rented out a suite for the evening, and you would walk in and she was just sitting on the bathtub, and you would bring your favourite poem. She would read the poem and you would get the recording. So then you have the recording for life. And it was a really beautiful thing to take away, and people paid large amounts of money to do so. They also had different types of poets there, and you would go and spend half an hour with a poet, and by the time you left for the evening, they would have written a poem just for yourself, or about a family member, or about a relationship you had, and you get that really kind of personal feel to it. And people pay a lot of money for those kind of personal items, personal experiences. Another really fabulous thing that's really underrated and has taken off quite a lot during COVID, which is fabulous, is matched fundraising. So you get an individual or a donor to match whatever you raise up to a certain amount, which gives a huge amount of incentive for fundraising, because you know that whatever you give as an individual, you'll be giving double that. So you can get so much more money for very little work. So, you know, there's so many things you can do. I worked with EY, and the corporate team did really fabulous work with their regional offices. They got some of the kind of art professionals that we are in touch with to go up and do kind of mental health workshops, which was really fabulous. So there's so much you can do, especially if you don't have a venue. If you do have a venue, you can target people. What's going on in your city? What's been really successful? You know, has there been anything that we could actually host, and that would bring a lot of publicity to the venue? So those are just kind of some examples of how you can really see that fundraising is really creative, and it's not all of this, oh, I need to make sure I've got very important patron, I need to make sure I've applied to the right foundations. It's not just that, it can be so much more creative. And then the other thing that Zoe mentioned that I'm going to go into a bit more detail in is the kind of thought process behind that all of the money is in London. Again, it's actually so opposite to that at the moment. So recently the government, alongside the Arts Council, has launched their Levelling Up campaign. I don't really agree with the name, because it says that everything needs to be like on the same scale as London, which isn't really true, but it showcases that they have this desire for the regions to have the same culture and economic status as the largest cities within the UK, which is fabulous. And so they've actually really looked at which regions they can target. They've been giving much more of their money recently to things that will show a regional impact. So if you're looking to apply to a trust or a foundation or a corporate with regional offices, you need to look at this regional impact. And this is what people are really caring about at the moment. It's absolutely key, is how many people you've impacted, how have you worked with schools, are you providing jobs for people in the region, how are you growing the economy within your region, and how are you affecting the greater good of the West Midlands. So a recent example I really, really love was Culture Coventry. And Culture Coventry, before they won the UK City of Culture bid, received a total of £7.4 million over 4 years as part of this Levelling Up agenda, which is mind-bogglingly huge, and not many people get that kind of funding. But it was really amazing and showcased the dedication people have at the moment to give to regional communities. So I really love this quote, which kind of showcases how important impact is for regional fundraising. So Hamish Glenn of the Belgrade Theatre said, "We're equally pleased to see an increase in funding for Coventry and the West Midlands, with particular benefit to our friends at Culture Coventry and the Open Theatre Company. Every £1 invested in the arts generates at least £4 for the local economy. So this is excellent news for the city and for our bid to be the UK City of Culture in 2021. So I think that quote really kind of sums up the fact that people are really looking to invest more in the regions, and this is a really key time for arts regional fundraisers. So it's really, really exciting, but I could talk about that forever. I worked in national partnerships, so that's kind of my love. But now I'm going to talk about a bit about how personality is so important. These two things about the next two kind of bits I'm going to focus on is, I mean, it's not the most, it's a little bit of a cynical point of view, but people don't give to organizations, people give to people. And I mean, you will always get somebody who has just loved an organization for their whole life. Maybe they went there as a child and they'll give a little bit of money. But in reality, the largest sums of money comes from a developed relationship, successful stewardship, and people feeling like they're getting that money can't buy experience, people feeling like they're being treated like an absolute, major donor, and feeling like they've got a real relationship with the organization. That's what people really like, and that's what people give money to, not because they can see your organization is really successful. Obviously that's a part, but they're giving to that stewardship experience. And then this kind of really leads into how to understand what the other side wants and what you have to offer. Again, a cynical point of view, but I will swear by this: no philanthropy is altruistic. Nobody gives out of the goodness of their hearts. These foundations, these corporates, they all have targets to meet. They all are doing something for a reason. They're not giving because it's really fabulous and they are just really passionate about it. I wish the world worked that way. I really do. So if you take a corporate, for example, why are they giving? They're giving because they're getting a tax relief. They're giving because they need to tick a box on this corporate social responsibility. Those two things have to happen every year. But what they want to add to that is the fact that they can get benefits. So not only if they give to XYZ organization, they can get all of these employee perks, they can get all of these venues to host their events at, maybe they can do some client entertaining, maybe they can offer something to their clients in their offices. So you look at that different, you look at what you can give them, and there's a real kind of thought process that actually, because they're ticking all of their boxes, they're getting the better end of the deal. Where really the key in fundraising is to make sure they're feeling like they get the better end of the deal, but it's costing you a lot less and you're getting a lot more bang for your buck. So that's kind of a really kind of banged, quick tips and tricks of what we've kind of have understood in the kind of fundraising realm. And I'll hand it back over to Zoe.
Thanks very much. Brilliant. So we'll move on just quickly to kind of a little bit of experience, and then we'll hand it over to you guys for questions. So firstly, how and when to engage either the rest of your own organisation or a critical friend, and what I mean by that is another organisation or person who can who maybe is going through a similar thing or has that experience that you might not have. And it's really important to understand when this is a good thing to do, but also to be reassured that the kind of the fundraising sector as a whole is pretty sharey. We like to talk to each other. We like to compare challenges and also to help find solutions. So an example of this that actually is fairly recent for myself is that both my organisation and another similar organisation, funded by the same trust, to do a very similar project, but we were getting two different responses from the funder, and that is a time to talk to that person at the organisation, ask to catch up over a coffee, have a bit of a chat. Why do you think you're getting this response and I'm getting this response? Is there something we can be doing? Is there something, or do we just need to leave it alone, and really have that kind of conversation. And like I say, be reassured that in the sector, it's super normal to have those conversations as fundraisers. It's really encouraged. And something that we do with YAF, with Young Arts Fundraisers as a network, is provide that forum and that connection to allow discussion and to allow those challenges to be shared and to come to some sort of solution. So secondly, how understanding what the other side wants has brought success. Julia's pretty much covered this. I'm slightly less cynical than Julia, because I mostly work with trusts and foundations, which are organizations set up to give out money for a charitable purpose. So yes, there is something that they want out of it. Generally speaking, it tends to be that they want what they want to see in the world. You're going to do something that's going to help add to that, that's going to help push that vision forward. But also, as Julia said, you know, you might also be offering a venue for them to host an event. You might be offering for an art piece to be installed in their offices for a time, which, you know, brings a bit more credibility to their office, brings something new and exciting, gives their staff something to look at, all that kind of staff engagement. But I think it's remembering that if what you offer the other side, as Julia said, gives them enough bang for their buck, or provides them with enough legacy in a project, then you will get money for it. And the trick is, as Julia said once more, the trick is making sure that you get the better end of the deal with that. And then finally, how to manage it once you've got it. So something we have briefly touched upon, and maybe is something that might come up in the questions, is around what you do once you have this money. You found it, you've secured it. Now what do you do with it? You probably spent it. And something that gets used a lot in the fundraising sector is stewardship, which essentially just means keeping people happy. So once they've gifted you with some money, you want to keep them happy because you want to encourage them to give you another gift of money a few years down the line or a few months down the line. So simple things that can be done in order to keep that relationship a good one and a profitable one is just being prompt with anything that they ask you for, reports or a budget or pictures of how the project's going. Keep in touch, let them know how things are, let them know how you are. Start to develop that relationship by managing the relationship that you have around the money, and kind of, you know, you can start to spread out a little bit, mention other things that you might have going on, mention other things that you think they'll be interested in, invite them to stuff if you have. I mean, it's very difficult in the world of COVID that we're living in, but if you are doing something over Zoom, you know, invite them to that. If you're going to visit somewhere for your own creative practice, see if they might want to, you know, for that project, see if they might want to come along and see that side of things. And finally, it's something that Julia's touched upon a few times. There's very traditional fundraising, which is that project based. You write an application and something comes in for that project. But more and more, we're having to be more creative in what we do. And so things with, and it stands for the stewardship as well. So be creative in that. Be creative in your thank yous. It doesn't have to be a letter. It doesn't have to be a phone call from the chief exec. It could be a video diary of work happening. It could be an offcut from a piece of work. You know, if I'm just thinking actually back to another example of my early days at the Science Museum. We rebuilt a robot, and people who supported it got the offcuts from the robot to have and to keep. And it was a really cool small thing that makes people feel valued. And ultimately, that's what you're trying to do, is you're trying to make those people feel valued and make them want to come back and support you and see what you're going to do next, because they really invest in you, both personally and kind of financially. So I'm going to pop onto the questions page now, and I might stop sharing my screen. But here is, just so everyone is aware, you can find us on Instagram, you can find us on Twitter, you can email us if you have any other questions after this session. And actually, I will pass over to Julia just to do a quick plug about Young Arts Fundraisers and the West Midlands.
Thank you, Zoe. Yeah, that actually, your whole talk reminded me of once the Arts Council said, when we went into lockdown, we thought, oh my gosh, we're saving so much money without going and doing all of these events. And the Arts Council said, I can't remember it word for word, but we've spent millions of pounds on cake to date, and we don't mind. because those coffees and those cakes create those necessary relationships that make the art stand on their 2 feet. And I kind of giggled to myself and realized that actually the Arts Council must spend so much money on cake, one, but also how much they value that personal connection. And it really made me kind of stand back and think that actually it is that important. But my little plug is that we are really, really keen to kind of create a West Midlands Young Arts Fundraisers network. And with that, we're looking for somebody who's based in the West Midlands to come and join our board and to work with me and our other regional representatives. At the moment, we've got somebody from Yorkshire, the Southwest and the Southeast to come and join and help with regional events, which are now on Zoom, but hopefully one day they'll be in person, to help kind of look at what topics could be discussed, what regional problems that fundraisers are facing, the arts and cultural kind of sector are facing in the West Midlands. So if you are interested, just get in touch. Either I'm on LinkedIn, Julia Price, or just email info@youngartsfundraisers.org, or tweet us or Instagram us. We're pretty active. So let us know. Without further ado, does anybody have any questions for Zoe or myself? Please don't be shy. Otherwise, we have to get back to our day jobs. Yes, Martha. Martha?
Hi, yeah. I just have a really quick question of whether you have any advice for sort of first-time fundraisers, because I've got a very small theatre company, but we're looking to, in the next few years, like write our first funding bid and get our first proper amount of funds in. I was wondering if you had any advice for that.
I'm going to hand that one over to Zoe because she's queen of funding bids.
Oh, thanks, Julia. Yeah, so it can always be, I actually think you have a really good opportunity, because it kind of, it's again, it's that thing about thinking that all the money's in London. It's the similar thing of thinking that all the established organisations get all the money. And we do have an advantage in that we can go, oh, look at all these projects we ran to time and to budget, aren't we great? But then all the funders are like, yeah, we know. So what else are you going to do? What more are you giving us? And it's a bit of an uphill struggle. So actually, as a kind of first time applicant for something, you've got that, you're so full of promise. You're so like, you've got all of that behind you. So I would really, and from the sounds of it as well, you'll have a couple of years of kind of activity behind you anyway. So you will have things that you can say, look, we ran this project, on a shoestring. It was brilliant. If you've got any feedback from people, that's always great to collect. You can also, if there's anyone that you've worked with that you can reach out to for letters of support, they're always super useful. And you can also have them quite light touch, so you can reuse them again and again. So things like that. So just showing that you have the support behind you, and that what you need to grow and to move on is the financial support, will be super helpful. I think as well, the other thing that you can do beyond that is to really kind of set out your stall for where you want to be and how that funding is going to get you there. Julia kind of touched on how the funding is going more regional now, and this whole level up agenda, which, yeah, I agree, I'm not particularly keen on the phrase, but that's really useful to feed into anything that you're applying for, because you're helping to boost that whole agenda with what you're doing. And I was going to say something else. My brain has stopped. I will leave it there, and if I remember, I'll jump in again.
Thanks. So yeah, I think that the letters of support on funding bids are so useful. I've had partners that were declined for funding, and then as soon as we gave them a letter of support, they were like, oh, here it is, it's fine, don't worry. And again, I would really showcase the regional impact, what you're doing for not only the theatre, but your community as well, is what people are really loving to see at the moment, and your goals.
Julia, Zoe, we've got a question in the chat. Do you want me to read it out, or?
No, that's fine. Yeah, I will. I can jump in here and then I'll pass over to Julia. So, no, it will completely be considered to be for funding. You don't. The projects don't have to be generating money. There are a few organisations that want to support organisations becoming more financially sustainable, but they're quite few and far between, and it's not the way that the sector is going at the moment. Things might change a little bit into next year, but things like mental wellbeing packages are something that are such a hot topic at the moment, that people will really want to put money into that and to be seen to be funding something like that. Like Julia was saying, you know, it's very rare to get a truly altruistic funder, and being seen to support something that is so socially current and does such good work is fabulous for kind of brand and for public engagement with a funder or a corporate. Julia, I don't know if you want to expand on that a little bit.
Yeah, a couple of points. I mean, one, you don't always have to look at regional impact as, you know, the economic benefit. You can look at regional impact, you know, to help mental well-being across a region is a huge impact. I mean, impact doesn't equal more money for a region. I mean, that's a really fabulous package. And again, you know, to be able to deliver that and to help a region succeed and to kind of help their mental well-being is absolutely fabulous. And I think I would look at it from a point of view that actually, you know, if you were looking at a trust or a corporate, these, as sad as it is, and again, this is my cynical corporate fundraiser background, people do follow trends at the moment. And a trend at the moment is mental well-being, and it's fantastic that it's being now kind of highlighted and it's now in the much more kind of public eye and people know it. It rolls off our tongues. It's not something that has as much stigma on it. But also these things get funded more easily because people want to be associated with it. It is that kind of brand alignment almost of what different organizations want to be associated with. You know, if you look at some trusts and foundations, not all of them are only focused on the arts or only focused on health and science. Some trusts and foundations have to support, let's say, 10 arts organizations, 10 health and wellbeing foundation organizations, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a huge variety. So you can look at that in many different ways. Yes, Ruth.
I'm working for the Council Theatre at the minute, and I'm just starting kind of like engage myself with their fundraising sector. And I was just wondering, because like when you fundraise money, you have to kind of ask for, or you have to get the contact details of someone that's like higher up in an organisation. And I was just wondering how you go about doing that. Like I feel like sometimes it feels a bit like you're a cold call, and I was just wondering how you kind of go about wording that over the phone and like communicating it in a way that it's like not a cold call.
Cold calls were my full-time job for a very long time. It works. Honestly, sometimes it can be a train. Sometimes I'll go to somebody on LinkedIn and they'll email me back with somebody else and they'll email me back with somebody else. Sometimes I'll call reception. And I think the one thing that's honestly the best way to do it, and I mean, it's an annoying one to say, but practice genuinely does make perfect with cold calling and confidence. If you get on the phone to somebody and you're umming and ahhing and you don't know who you want to talk to, and you come across as kind of like you're not really meant to be talking to them, they will pick that up. But if you kind of call and you say, oh, you know, so-and-so from XYZ organization, can I speak to John Doe? They'll always say, is he expecting a call? And then that you just have to prepare answers for that by saying, oh, I'm from XYZ, I'm looking to talk to him about this opportunity, and just make it really positive. I've had a lot of training in my time about kind of power words and bin words. And there are some words that we were taught never to use, like anything that's slightly negative. I always kind of take it with a pinch of salt, but when you're fundraising, it goes back to that stewardship role, but it is your job to make people feel great at all times. Even if, I've been in a situation where people have been like, I want to do this, this, and this. And I'm like, well, absolutely not. But you need to turn around and say, oh my gosh, that's so interesting. You want to do X, Y, Z. Let's think about doing it in a different way. So maybe taking it and making sure that when you're cold calling people, you're looking at opportunities, you're looking at really exciting things you can do together, partnerships, rather than asking for money explicitly.
And just to add a small trust and foundation perspective, I don't know if you're kind of focusing on companies or just across the board. It feels less cold caller-y on trust and foundations, because why else would you be calling them? They know that you want money from them. So it feels a little more comfortable. And I think you've already got that in there, so you can be a little bit more straightforward with a trust or a foundation, and sort of say, hi, I'm calling from XYZ, and I really want to talk to you about this project that we have going and the possibility of getting that funded from you. Would now be a good time? Can I send you some more information? That kind of thing. So you've got a bit more of the doors already open with those. But like Julia said, it might feel a little bit uncomfortable, but sometimes it is just the best way forward. And I mean, at the moment, with most people working from home, people are quite responsive to emails, I find. So if you want to go in that way as well, that's a pretty good way of going. And I think one other thing to remember is that, no relationship starts when you already know each other. You've always got to make that first step. And the person you cold call today, like next year, they might be your absolute go-to person on a project that they're funding, which is really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've just remembered, I always like to invite them to something, even if it's a coffee, or even if, depending on what your arts organization is, it may be just 2 tickets to a performance or an exhibition opening, or coming and meeting the artists or something like that. Even if you have like 10 places and you can do like a little coffee morning with people, it's really nice sometimes, because it doesn't feel to them like a cold call. It feels like an invitation when really your motives are for money. Right. Laura. Yeah, absolutely. Taking on fundraising responsibilities when your boss holds that area, if anybody can't see the chat. Advice for broaching, just do it. Your boss will probably just be like, oh my God, thank goodness. I'm so busy. I would say, ask for a one-to-one, ask, maybe in your next appraisal saying, I'm really looking for more responsibility. I'm really interested in learning how to fundraise. It might be that he takes you to meetings, or she takes you to meetings first, so that you can kind of see her tone of voice or his tone of voice and learn more about how they approach fundraising. Or maybe you just ask to sit in on some meetings. Honestly, just ask. So many people, especially in the arts, are so keen to help people develop, and I think that's what I've found is the best part of working in the arts, is they are genuinely so keen to help you develop. People are very aware that sometimes art salaries are never going to be the best in the world, and so they like to be able to give you other types of payment, and that will be in professional development, or that's what I've found to date. So I would just completely ask and say, look, it's something I'd really love to learn more about, and honesty is key, I think.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. I think, like Julie was saying, honestly, if someone came to me asking to help me with some of my fundraising, I'd bite the hand off.
Yes.
I'd be like, yeah, what do you want?
Take it.
Yeah, so
here's my to-do list.
Just go for it. And I think one thing to add though, if you know a little bit more, like if you know a bit more in depth what your boss is doing in terms of fundraising, and there's something really specific that you're really interested in, whether that's a project or a particular funder that they might be working with. I think it's quite good to be, if you can, be specific, just because it'll give your boss a better idea of how to manage that kind of thing. And like Julia was saying, they can take you to meetings so you can see tone of voice, or I mean, I guess at this point it's sitting in on a Microsoft Teams call, or you might be able to help with some reporting or an application, you know, an area of an application. So I think
taking over
go
spreadsheets.
For it.
Thank you. Any more questions? Anyone? Katie? 1 second.
I don't know if I like fully know exactly what I'm asking you, but basically, have you got any thoughts on, like, as a young person, gaining respect in like the whole funding area, or in both sides, whether you're the one that maybe is providing funding if you've made it into an organisation, or if you're asking for it? Because I just find, I mean, you might have different opinions from your experiences, but I just find young people don't get the respect, and that makes it harder a lot of the time, if that makes sense. I don't know if you've got any thoughts.
Sorry, I'm going to let you go first. I'm going to muse it over. I have a lot of thoughts.
I also have thoughts. I think I've been very lucky in my experience, in that I joined the organisation at a time where there ended up being 2 people in the trust team. So there was no time to worry that I was too young to take on the responsibility. It was pretty much, you need to get going. However, that's very unusual. And I think one thing that is quite present in the fundraising sector is a kind of strange power dynamic between fundraisers predominantly being female and funders predominantly being old white men, to not put too fine a point on it. Lovely, very passionate about changing the world, old white men, but nonetheless it can sometimes feel like a bit of a strange power dynamic. How I've always felt respected, and I think part of that is down to knowing everything I can about a project. So if I am asked, if I'm questioned, like, oh, what's this line in a budget? Like, actually, I can tell you exactly what that is, what that would cover, and how this is going to benefit the project, how that's going to create impact down the line. So just really, I'm just aware that we're recording, but knowing your shit is absolutely, you know, integral to gaining that respect for when you are out there fundraising. I think that's probably, yeah, I think that's my main sort of takeaway. And I feel like I've been very fortunate to not experience, you know, too many issues around that. And I think, yeah, knowing everything. And another thing is that creating that relationship. So you're the one who always answers the emails or answers the phone, then you're the one they know. And it doesn't matter what your job title is. It doesn't matter what you're doing within the organization. They're still going to be like, well, I'm not going to get a hold of the chief exec, so I'll speak to Katie, because she's who I spoke to last time and she was really helpful. I know that sounds quite reductive, but it's true. People, as we said, people give to people, and the same goes for their respect, I think. Julia, I will let you continue with any other thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably say, you can tell by looking at me, I look like a 12-year-old. So especially now coming in with Zoom meetings, I've always kind of found that people think I'm a lot younger and inexperienced than I am, which has been difficult. But again, like Zoe alluded to, it just took me a bit more time to just prove to them that actually I know my shit, as Zoe said. And so I think it's just, I almost wanted to use the word, just like badassing it, to be like, actually, no, I'm the one who has control of this. I know everything. And just almost not demanding it, but demanding it in just how competent you can be. I think that was my way forward, and just like absolutely smashing targets. And and just kind of going for it, really. But it was definitely a struggle with funders, like Zoe alluded to. I think it just took a bit of getting used to it. I think this is going to change in the next few years, and it'll be really exciting as the kind of world changes. But I would say, almost like Zoe says, the first point of contact is the person people remember. And if you can actually get things done for them, and you're kind and you're open and you're chatty to them, they are the person that they will remember, and they will continuously email. And then you can take that and say, actually, I'm now the primary contact for all of these people. And that's when you can go in and kind of showcase if you want a promotion or anything like that. So yeah, in complete agreement to Zoe.
Just noticed that Emily had a question around software and admin skills. Julia and I were talking about software earlier today, funnily enough. You will find that kind of there's two big, I guess there's three big CRM systems that most kind of arts and cultural organisations tend to use, and that's Razor's Edge, Spectrix, and Tessitura. So if you get the opportunity to use them, it can be useful. It turns up a lot on job applications or job descriptions, which I actually don't think is reasonable, because
anybody can use them.
Yeah,
it's just common sense.
Yeah, and they're also, and I'm going to say this quietly, but I don't find them useful. However, if you get the opportunity to see it and have a play about, that is always quite useful. And I think in terms of admin skills, spreadsheets, yeah, absolutely.
Budgets again. Like high-end Excel skills is really awesome, to be honest, to make it, because you can use Excel to showcase the budget, or you can use Excel to give you a lot of graphs to showcase to your funders what exactly you're doing and when. And that's really cool. But CRM systems is something they always ask for in jobs descriptions. And there's so many different kinds. And if you go onto the corporate side of things, or you're not in an arts organization, there's even more. I think they just have to ask for it. I don't even know why. But honestly, I would just, it's just like add person to contact. And like, yes, okay, here's their details. But yeah, CRM is definitely the first thing that comes to mind, and then Excel.
Yeah, and I think as well, my Excel skills are fairly lacking, but I still use it regularly for things like roles and responsibilities on a project. It's much easier to see in an Excel spreadsheet than it is done in a Word table. So it just, anything where you can ensure that what you are doing is as clear as possible to everyone involved, I think is really helpful, and Excel does that for you fabulously.
Thank you. I think that's it. If there's any more questions. No? Well, thank you, Julia and Zoe, for today's session. It's been insightful, and I hope everyone found it useful and has enjoyed it. Like I said, we have recorded this session, so it will be available after, and we'll send anything across. But no, thank you, Julia and Zoe, for this.
Thank you so much for having us. It's been lovely to talk to you all. And yeah, Julia's just put our contact information in the chat, so feel free to email us about anything. And also do check us out. We do run events, and they are Zoom based at the moment, so anyone can access them. You also don't have to be a fundraiser, so please do feel free to register and come along.
Thank you.
Thanks all for having us.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.